Okay, so today we're going to continue to solve equations with radicals, but instead of just one radical, we'll now have two. Okay? When we solve equations with two radicals, it's the same process. The only difference is when we isolate a radical, we have two of them now. But we're just going to focus on isolating one radical and then continuing the same steps. So you might need your notes from Friday if you do not remember the steps, but just follow those steps. Okay? So the first example we're going to work today . Okay, so before, when we were solving equations with radicals, our first step was to isolate the radical. Well, we have two. Okay, so whenever we have two, our focus is just to isolate one. In this case, they're both isolated. So once we isolate one or both, we want to then get rid of the radical of the one that we isolated. Okay, so in this case, again, they're both isolated, so we can just pick one. So in this case, we want to get rid of the radical for 2x plus 5. Okay, the square root of 2x plus 5. So to get rid of this radical, we have to do the opposite operation. Okay, and this is going to be a lot similar to what we did on Friday. So the opposite operation of a root is a power, and this is root 2. So we want to take the square root of 2x plus 5, but you want to take that to the power of 2. Okay. We want to square it to get rid of the radical. And what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. And we know, since these are opposite operations, the root is now canceled by the power, and we're left with whatever was underneath. So we now have 2x plus 5. And it just so happens that this was also root 2. So this cancels as well. And this is x plus 7. So you have 2x plus 5 equals x plus 7. Now if you look at your steps, we should now be on step 3. So this is just solving this linear equation. Since we only have one variable, we have x to the first degree, we can just isolate x. Okay. So I'm going to subtract x from this side. So my x's stay positive, so I'm left with x plus 5 equals 7. And now I just want to subtract 5 from both sides to isolate x. We're left with x equals 2. Okay. So now we just want to check our answer. So 2 times 2 is 4. 4 plus 5 is 9. Square root of 9 is 3. 2 plus 7 is 9, square root of 9 is 3. So 3 equals 3, and this works. Okay, so there's not much different from what we talked about Friday. The only difference is when we have two, just focus on isolating one and doing the same process that we did before. Okay, do you guys have any questions about that first one? No? Alright, so the second one will be a little bit more difficult. Not too much. So we have the square root of x plus 6 minus the square root of 7 minus x equals -1. Okay? So like before, the first step is to isolate one of the radicals. Alright? If we want to isolate one of the radicals, I think the square root of x plus 6 will be better because it will stay positive. We can add the square root of 7 minus x to both sides. Okay, so if we do that, we will get square root x plus 6 equals square root of 7 minus x minus 1. Okay. Now we have one radical isolated. So our step now, we're on step 2. We want to get rid of the radical or focus on getting rid of the radical of the one we isolated. Okay, so this again is a square root. So the opposite operation of a square root is the power of 2, or to square it. So we're going to square this side. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. Now we have to square everything here. So we're going to put it all in parentheses. And square it. Okay. So this side is easy. We know that these cancel out. So just left with x plus 6. And then here on the right, we treat this just as we would any other binomial. So we can't distribute the 2. We can't distribute the 2 because of the minus sign. So this is the square root of 7 minus x minus 1 times square root of 7 minus x minus 1. Okay? Now just because there is a square root, we don't want to freak out. We just still want to continue to do this what we would normally do. So we want to simplify this and distribute each term to each term. So this times this, okay, and that's a square root times a square root. Okay, so they cancel. Alright, so we're left with 7 minus x for these two right here. Now we have to distribute it to negative 1. And so negative 1 times the square root of 7 minus x is just negative square root of 7 minus x. Now we will distribute the negative 1. So that's going to be another negative square root of 7 minus x. And then negative 1 times negative 1, that's positive 1. Okay? And this x plus 6 is still the same. Alright? So we still take the same steps. So if we're multiplying two binomials, still treat it the same. Alright? So now we have to simplify this. We want to combine like terms. Okay? So the x plus 6, just leave over here. Here we have a 7 and a 1. Okay, so that's 8. Here we just have a minus x. And then we have 2 of these. Okay? We have 2 of these. So this is going to become minus 2 square root of 7 minus x. So we just combine those two together. We combine these right here. So it's minus 2 square root of 7 minus x. Okay? So if you notice, after we've gotten rid of that first radical we isolated, we got to do the same thing. Okay? We got to isolate this radical here and do that same process. Alright? So nothing's changing necessarily. There's just another step. You have to get rid of all the radicals. So let's move all of this over here to the left side. So you want to subtract 8 and add x. Subtract 8 and add x. So now we have 2x minus 2 equals negative 2 square root of 7 minus x. Alright? And now we still have this negative 2 in front, so it's not isolated yet. So we want to divide by negative 2. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other. And so 2x divided by 2 is negative x divided by negative 2. And negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. Plus 1 equals square root of 7 minus x. Okay? So we can just divide both terms by negative 2 here, and this is what we'll have. So now, we've seen this before, okay? We want to get rid of this radical. So to get rid of this radical, this is a square root. So the opposite operation is to take it to the second power, or to square it. So we square both sides, okay? So this is just 7 minus x. This is now negative x plus 1 times negative x plus 1. Now we distribute, multiply these together, you'll get positive x squared, and you'll get minus 2x plus 1. Okay? I just kind of skipped all the extra work, so work this out if you don't see how to get this. But when you multiply or FOIL these, you'll get x squared minus 2x plus 1. Okay? And then we just have a linear equation that we can solve. Okay? In this case, we have an x squared and an x. Okay? So we don't just have an x, so we can't just isolate x. So since we have this x squared term, we want to set everything equal to 0. So we want to get everything on the same side. So we want to subtract this 7 and add this x. We want to get everything on the same side. So now we will have on the left side x squared minus x plus 6. Oh, sorry, minus 6. Because it's 1 minus 7. Okay? Equals 0. And here we have a trinomial. So what method can we use to factor this? AC method. Okay, can we use a shortcut? Yes, because A is positive 1. Okay, so AC in this case is 1 times negative 6, so it's negative 6. Our B is negative 1. So what two numbers multiplied to give us negative 6 but combined to give us negative 1? Yeah, so 2, positive 2 and negative 3 combined to give us negative 1 and multiply to give us 6. So our factors are x minus 3 and x plus 2 equals 0. Since we have it completely factored out, we can set each individual piece equal to 0. So we get x minus 3 equals 0, and x plus 2 equals 0, and x equals 3, x equals negative 2 once we solve for x. Okay? Now, just as before, we have to check our answers. Okay? So if we plug in 3 to the top, 3 plus 6 is 9. Square root of 9 is 3. Okay? 7 minus 3 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. So 3 minus 2 is 1. So that does not equal negative 1. Okay? So this one is no bueno. No, I don't know how to spell it. No bueno. Okay? No bueno. Now negative 2. Negative 2 plus 6 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. 7 minus negative 2 is 9. Square root of 9 is 3. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. So this one does work. So your solution is negative 2. X equals negative 2. Alright? So, yes, there is quite a bit of work, but it's not necessarily hard work. Okay, it's the same thing we've been doing. So anytime we have two radicals, we want to isolate one. Okay, once you isolate one, you get rid of it, and then you should be left with one more if you started with 2. So you got to isolate that one and get rid of it. So we just got to get rid of the radicals one at a time. Okay. Do you guys have any questions? Alright, and just to help you guys out, it's the same steps pretty much as solving with one radical. We just have to repeat those steps more than once. Alright, you guys have a good day.